£10,000 a month is not easy to get to. However, the way you got to look at it and the way you got to think about it is reverse engineering it. Guys, so in today's video, I'm going to be answering your most frequently asked questions that I normally get via social media and on my channel. So today, I've got Alex asking all the questions. So Alex, what's the first question you got for me?
What would you do with £50,000?
So look, if I was starting out with £50,000, I would not invest that money. And the reason I say that is because ultimately, if you're going to be investing a small capital pot of 50,000, although I know it's a lot of money to a lot of people, but generally speaking in the property world, 50,000 is quite a small pot if you're looking to try and, really stretch that money. I would be looking at doing potentially a property flip with it, or a property trade, as we call it. So what you really need to be focused on with that £50,000 is how can you amplify that? How can you make that 50,000 into 100,000, 150, or even 200,000? Because you really want to be able to double or even quadruple that money before you start investing. So just remember, earn the money, and then obviously you've got to make sure you amplify that money before you start investing it. So for me, I'd be looking at a property flip where you would buy a property, you do some works to it, and then you sell it on and make a profit, and maybe aiming it at the lower end of the market. So not anything too expensive, maybe trying to focus on properties that are around about sort of 100 to 120,000. You can maybe take out a bridging loan, and that bridging loan will allow you to basically, stretch that £50,000 equity, so you can use part of that for your refurb cost and part of that for your equity to buy the property. Or you could look at property trading. So if you're really, really good at finding very good property deals, you can get a good property deal and then you can put it into auction or put it into the open market without doing any works to it. And effectively, you will be amplifying that money. Once you've amplified it, then you can look at investing it. But for me, if I had £50,000, I would be very much focused on how I can double or quadruple that before I start investing it.
How would you invest £100,000?
So if it was me looking to invest £100,000 and I didn't have loads of time on my hands, for example, then I would personally be looking to buy 4 single family homes, putting down sort of circa £20,000 to £25,000 deposit on each one. Obviously you've got to factor in your stamp duty and your legal costs, but I'll be putting in around about £20,000 to £25,000 on each property in total with cost, buying 4 properties with that money, and ultimately having 4 different income streams from those properties and 4 different sets of capital appreciation from those properties. So for me, it's more about, rather than buying one property with £100,000 cash, how can you make sure you get the majority of your kind of cash to work for you? You've got to stretch that equity out as far as you can. And the only way you do that is by using leverage. So if you've got £100,000, you leverage around about £300,000. You've then got £400,000 to buy around about 4 properties at £100,000 each. They would typically rent out for about £650, maybe even £700 a month on average. And that will give you a net cash flow of around about £1,000 to £1,300 on a monthly basis after all the costs and fees associated. So for me, that's what I'd be looking to do if I had £100,000 and I was looking to start out in property investing today.
How could you create £10,000 a month from property investment?
Look, £10,000 a month is not easy to get to. However, the way you got to look at it and the way you got to think about it is reverse engineering it. So £10,000 a month on average might be around about, if we're saying £500 per property, you're going to be looking at around about 20 properties on average. So you need to figure out how are you going to get to 20 properties with around about £500 to £600 a month cash flow, right? So that could be from a variation of things. That could be using the money that you're getting from your job or your business that's surplus, maybe buying 1 or 2 properties a year with that money, or that could be going out and raising finance and raising investment from friends, family, colleagues, etc., investors, using that money to buy the properties, refurbish those properties and refinance them. And by doing that, ultimately what you're doing is you're recycling your money, and that's what's going to allow you to grow way quicker than just basically being able to buy one and then wait to actually get more money to be able to buy another one. But ultimately you need to get to around about 20 properties with £500 to £600 worth of cash flow. And on average, I'd say that takes around about 3 to 5 years to get to. So it's not that it's impossible, it's just the fact that you need to have a proper plan, and then ultimately you need to have a good time frame that you need to be able to get there. So it needs to be a realistic time frame. So I would say doing that in 1 to 2 years is probably very unrealistic unless you had loads of cash lying around. If you don't have loads of cash lying around, then you can do it, but I'd say it takes more around 3 to 5 years to get there. But on average, you need around 20 properties, £500 to £600 cash flow every single month, and that's when you'll get to your £10,000 a month cash flow figure.
How do you buy properties so quickly?
So the way that we normally buy properties really, really quickly is a couple of things. The first thing we do is we are very, very decisive. So we use various different bits of software. We get what's called an AVM, an automated valuation. So the automated valuation comes back and it gives us a figure. It says, this is what we value the property at. We will then analyze that and come back with a figure to the vendor or to you if you're looking to sell your property to us. And we'll say, look, on average, the property is worth £100,000. We're willing to offer you £80,000 for that property. Now, if that's agreed and that's negotiated, from our point of view, we can move with legals very, very quickly. So we can get the legals done in around about 7 to 14 days if we want to exchange really quickly. And the way that we do that is we indemnify all the searches. So we don't need to get the searches done. We put an indemnity insurance in place to make sure that if anything came back on the searches that would affect the property, then we are insured to cover that. So that's a calculated risk. The second thing is our solicitor is basically someone that works specifically with us, and he prioritizes our cases, which is really, really important. The majority of properties in the UK, in terms of progression, of sales progression, get delayed because solicitors are really, really not prioritizing your case. So they've probably got your case on the bottom of the list. And actually what they do every single day is whoever shouts the loudest and calls them, emails them, that's who takes priority for them. But they've got this huge, huge list. And look, ultimately solicitors are underpaid in the UK. That's the problem that we've got in the system. If solicitors were paid properly and paid well, which is what the norm should be, then ultimately solicitors will prioritize everyone's cases and we won't have such a big backlog and such a big workload on solicitors. So for us, making sure we work with the right solicitor that understands what we're trying to achieve, what we're trying to do, and works within our time frame is really, really important. We indemnify the searches, and in some cases, we don't actually need to even get a survey done on the property as well. So those are the 3 key reasons why we are able to move at speed and able to exchange on properties in anywhere from 7 to 14 days. Couple of things. The first thing, which is probably the most important thing, is the property dilapidated? Is the property run down? Because ultimately what is working really, really well in auctions is rundown properties. Anything that's in very good condition, or it might be a new build, the best bet for that is to go open market with it, because that's where you're going to get the full value for a property, and that's not what auction buyers are looking for. Most people buying a property in auction are looking for what we call like a project. Now, everyone's watched Homes Under the Hammer over the years, I'm sure, when you've either been bunking off school or bunking off work. And in Homes Under the Hammer, it teaches people to basically buy a property and do it up. That's the basic principles of what auctions are all about. And to be honest with you, that does translate into the real world, although Homes Under the Hammer, I think they put £5,000 generally for a refurb, when actually it's probably 10 times that. But yeah, that's a story for another day. The point that I'm trying to make today is most people going to auction to buy a property are looking for something run down. So that's number 1, is rundown properties. Number 2, you're looking for a good discount to market value. So if you feel like the market value for that property is £100,000, you really need to be able to buy that property at anywhere between £75,000 to £85,000 to give you enough of a chance to make a margin on it when you're selling it on. And number 3, which for me is probably one of the most important things, focus on the lower end of the market. If you're going to high end, if you're going for the expensive part of the market, i.e. £600,000 plus, then that's where a lot of the risk is, and that's where a lot of the properties end up sticking, because auction's made for speed and for certainty. And people at the lower end of the market will give you speed and certainty because they're all affordable properties at that end. At the higher end of the market, you're looking for that one specific niche buyer. So for me, that's quite a risky strategy. So I'm looking realistically for dilapidated properties with a discount where you can actually get a lower value part of the kind of market or a lower value part of the country. And for me, those are the 3 reasons why we can buy properties and trade them really, really well into auctions.
What if I make a loss when trading properties?
So look, the reality is when you're trading a property, it's not always going to be rainbows and sunshine. You are going to come across a point where you're going to have to take a loss. I think the problem is people don't want to take a loss and end up trying to chase their losses, as you do get with everything. You know, it's almost like looking at it as calculated gambling in a way, or taking kind of a calculated risk. But ultimately, when you're doing that, you need to know when to cut your losses, because you will make a loss. And as soon as you feel like, the property basically has been maximized, you've done the best of your ability to sell that property, but it's still making you a loss, just take that loss and move on. You will make that profit elsewhere and you'll even it out. But I think the key for me is being able to know when to take the loss, and also at the same time not get too greedy as well, because when you're making a profit, don't get too greedy with how much profit you're trying to make. If you're making a profit, you're never ever going to go back on that profit. So make sure you take your profit, but also cut your losses where you can, and look at the big picture and blend things in. If you're good at finding properties, which you should be if you're watching this video, then ultimately you can find more opportunities. So don't keep chasing that one little property or one little deal that you've got. Make sure that you are really, really focused on your volume and your pipeline, and just move on to the next property, because you will have to take a loss at some point if you are property trading.
How do you fund property deals?
So look, in terms of how we actually fund our own property deals, it's a mixture of things. We use debt, so we will use things like bridging loans. We've also got facilities set up as well with other bridging lenders, and we'll use our own cash. So it's a blend of all those three things. Now, if someone wants to complete in 2 days or exchange in 2 days, we'd probably use our own cash for something like that. If someone's happy to wait 7 to 14 days to exchange, we'll use our facility. And if someone can wait a bit longer than that, then we use a bridging loan. So we really utilize all of our resource according to the situation that we're in, the time frame that's required, and also the property that's in front of us. Are we going to get access to that property? Are we not going to get access to the property? So we need to understand the whole variable, and then depending on all those variables, we'll then decide what kind of cash, bridging loan or facility that we're going to use in order for us to be able to buy that property.